Alright, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today we're going to be talking about the New Mexico first special election for United States Congress. And this district is pretty much metropolitan Albuquerque plus a few other areas. And I'm going to be talking about a poll that was actually released to this race. And there's a very good chance that this poll could be very wrong. There's a very good chance that this poll could be 100% accurate. Or not 100% accurate, but pretty close to it, with the margin being relatively close overall. And just to make sure I'm getting my information correct, here we go. So the first district in November, the final result was 58-41, or it was close. I'm gonna round, so it was closer to 58-42. Which was a 58-42. That's a 16-point difference, right? Now, the reason why this is a special election is Deb Haaland was nominated for a cabinet position, and she accepted and was confirmed to that. And now we have a special election with the Democrat Melanie Stansbury and the Republican Mark Moores. And the poll that was just released had Stansbury, the Democrat, up 49-33, a 16-point difference, which matches November's previous election, but it was 49-33, right? But that's the top line result. I always say disregard the top line result. It's meaningless. And there's a reason why. If we go to the crosstabs, the sample that they wound up getting, and this is going to lead to some, in my opinion, issues with the, this is going to lead to issues with waiting, because you have to wait polls. And I'm not saying that, like, to get a certain result or something, you have to say, okay, this is the result based off of, previous elections, how many people did this, that, or the other thing, how many of this group turned out, how many of this group turned out, stuff like that. So 70% of people surveyed already voted. That is not going to be accurate, in my opinion. I think it's going to be much closer than that, maybe 60-40. Or around 58% of people already voted before Election Day, and about 40-43%, maybe 45% vote on Election Day. I don't think only 30% are going to vote on Election Day, which is June 1st. Of this, 44% of people surveyed said they were men, and a little bit over 55% said they were women. It's going to be closer to 53-47 in favor of women. At least historically speaking, that's kind of going to be what it's going to wind up being. Their sample, it was about evenly split between age groups, but I think they had an unusually high amount of, 18 to 34 is a pretty wide age bracket, so I'm going to give them the pass on that. 35 to 54 was 30%, 55 to 64 was 22%, and then 65 plus was 30%. 56% of people surveyed were white, 33% were Latino, and then everyone else was about 11%. I think that's reasonably accurate from what I remember of this area and what I remember from the districts that I've been drawing. No. However, I think this is the biggest issue. This is the biggest issue that I've found. They way oversampled people with a bachelor's degree or above, in my opinion. I think their sample is very much oversampling people with a college education. About 36% of people sampled had a 4-year degree or above. 11% had a graduate degree. So master's, PhD, or some form of postgraduate degree. 25% had a bachelor's degree. New Mexico is one of the least educated states in terms of college education. By the way, 32% had an associate's degree or had taken college classes. Again, I think they oversampled, and that includes even Albuquerque, which is, I think, the most educated. Santa Fe may be more educated, but Santa Fe and Albuquerque are the two most educated cities in New Mexico. And even then, I think this is stretching it for New Mexico. If we look at some of the other crosstabs, of the people who have already voted, 51% say they voted for the Democrat, 35% say they voted for the Republican. But this is where things get a little bit weird. I would expect for people who say they're likely to vote that that fewer are going to back the Democrat. But this gets really weird for me because the Republican drops by even more than the Democrat does in people who say they are likely to vote, or basically are going to vote on election day. That doesn't make sense to me, especially given what we've learned about early voting, absentee and mail-in voting versus in-person on election day voting. But then again, that may be accounted for by the amount of people who say they're undecided, which is very high at 18%. But again, I'm a little skeptical of this part of the crosstab. I don't think that they're wrong in terms of this is what results they got from this group. I think that they got a bad sample and that the sample is going to be off. Here's another one that I think is really weird to me. By the way, they did have a bit of an anomaly, or as they put it, a random error. Of people who have already voted, 5% are undecided. They even noted and said, yeah, that's a bit awkward. This paradoxical response is likely due to random error. But going on to the gender breakdown, 53% of men said they supported the Democrat, whereas 33% said they supported the Republican. But this is where things get weird. Women said that they were 47% likely to support the Democrat and 34% to support the Republican. I think it's a little bit weird that in terms of support for the Republican, there is no gender gap at all, and that there's a much higher gender gap in favor of the Democrat for men. I think that's extremely weird, and I think that's a bit of an anomaly. I'm not saying that they didn't get this result from their survey. I'm saying I think their sample is a bit off. again, one thing being off is not enough. One thing not making sense is enough to say, yes, they have a bad sample. However, now we've got two things that don't make much sense given what we know about elections in America, where men tend to favor Republicans more than women. Here we have the opposite. And a 6% difference in support between men and women is enough to be statistically significant. But that could be accounted for. 6% more women said they were undecided than men, so who knows? If we break it down by race, whites have approximately, 7% more support for the Republican than Hispanics do, though Hispanics are at 58% support for the Democrat, whereas whites are at 47% more for the 47% for the Democrat. And again, this is another thing that just seems a bit off. Other races, aka black and mixed race, Asian, etc., they favored the Republican 39 to 35. Now, we do have to remember that group consisted of only 11% of the electorate, but that is a very unusual part of the sample, and of course it is subject to a very high margin of error, because out of, I think it was like 550, so 10% is 55, so yeah, we're talking about 60 people surveyed. So again, a high margin of error, take that part of the crosstab with a grain of salt. We're talking about a lot more than that, and we're talking about the Hispanic and the white demographic subgroups. But even then, there's a little bit of okay. I'm very curious about that. That said, the Republicans are at 28% with the Hispanics. There could be a very high margin of error with that one too, just because Hispanics tend to be very difficult to get a hold of. And New Mexico was much less Democratic than people expected this in 2020 in November, because Trump overperformed with Hispanics. We're going to see if Trump performing with Hispanics was just really Republicans overperforming with Hispanics. Don't know yet. We'll see. Then if we go by age, 18 to 34, yeah, that's what I expected. 35 to 54 is tied. That's not unreasonable. But older people and senior citizens supporting the Democrat by the same amount that very young people do, that's a little bit of a surprise for me, but hey, not necessarily, 100%. Nothing super off there. The racial demographic, it's not like it's appalling, but it is a little bit interesting to see. Like, it's an interesting breakdown. And then high school, looking at the education breakdown. Looking at that, it's not an unreasonable margin based off of what I've seen. Yeah. Okay. And then the approval. Okay, so. And then where they got their responses from. So I'm going to be honest with you. I think that their poll may be favoring Salisbury, the Democrat, more than the final election results will. Biden also overperformed the House candidate, Holland, in November in the district. So I'm gonna be wondering. Like I said, I think they're. I'm not just basing this off of this, that, and reasons. I think their samples aren't perfect. I think they wound up sampling a much more Democratic group than the electorate is going to be. And I think that it's going to be a little bit closer than it was in November. I don't think it's going to be enough for Moores to win, but I wouldn't be overly surprised to see him at, say, 45% in the district. So I'm putting it as likely. We could see a massive surprise, of course, but I'm reasonably confident about this result. So that's about where I think it is. I want everybody to take it easy. Have a very nice evening. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.